In February 1945, when World War II was about to end, three heads of state assembled in Crimea to discuss the reorganization of Europe: Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. They held the historic Yalta Conference, a summit that was meant to establish peace but ended up dividing Europe into two camps: an American camp and a Soviet camp, a Western alliance and an Eastern alliance. Germany was the first to be divided. It was split into four zones: the British, the French, the American, and the Soviet. 4 years after the war ended, the divisions widened, the camps grew in size, the Western alliance was formalized into an organization. It was called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, an association of 12 states. The Eastern Alliance was formalized into a pact, the Warsaw Pact, an association of 8 states. Then came the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between these two camps. It lasted for over 4 decades and divided the entire world. By the end of 1961, this is what the divisions looked like: more than 40 countries in the American camp, more than 15 countries in the Soviet camp, and 18 non-aligned nations, plus respective zones of influence. With each passing year, the divisions sharpened, the factions expanded, the respective leaders of these camps began pursuing a policy of containment, restricting each other's zones of influence. They never really fought directly, but they waged proxy wars and conflicts, like the 1950 Korean War, the 1955 Vietnam War, the 1960 Congo crisis, the 1967 Cambodian Civil War, the 1979 Soviet-Afghan War. These wars were accompanied by regime changes, the installation of puppet leaders, orchestrated revolutions, manufactured unrest, all deftly curated by these two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. 3 decades on, is history repeating itself? Look at what's playing out in our world today. Ukraine is at war, Europe is divided, and so is the rest of the world. Is this another Cold War? And more importantly, who is winning this one? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. The war in Ukraine is reshaping the world order. This map tells you the story. The war has created two clear camps. On Ukraine's side is most of Europe, along with the United States, Canada, and their allies. On Russia's side are Belarus, China, North Korea, Iran, and a few other countries. Each camp is trying to outwit the other, resist the other's diplomatic maneuvers. Their leaders are going on state visits, trying to pull new countries onto their side. In the month of May, US President Joe Biden visited Tokyo to attend the Quad Summit. The same month, the Russian foreign minister went to Riyadh to attend a GCC summit. In July, Biden visited Israel and Saudi Arabia to repair ties. A week later, Putin landed in Iran to forge a new economic alliance. The list of such tit-for-tat visits is long. In July and August, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Vietnam and Myanmar to drum up support. In response, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Cambodia and the Philippines. Then the two leaders tested their clout in Africa. Lavrov toured 4 African countries: Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the Republic of Congo. Days later, Blinken went to South Africa, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. What do these visits tell you? That a new power competition has begun, a geopolitical struggle to set the rules of global conduct. It's been called Cold War 2.0, and it is clear that the US is not winning this one. Its charm offensive is not really working. Most countries do not want to side with the US. They're resisting Biden's pressure campaign. They're rejecting America's attempts to lead the world. Case in point, Saudi Arabia. Biden went to Riyadh with one primary objective. He wanted to convince Saudi Arabia to dump Russia, to increase its oil production. Despite a controversial fist bump with Crown Prince MBS, Biden failed to achieve this objective. In an embarrassing blow last week, OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Export Countries, told Biden that they will not increase the oil output. You know what's even more embarrassing? This statement by the Secretary General of OPEC. He wants Russia to remain a part of OPEC+. He says Moscow's membership is crucial to the success of their organization. Around the same time, another revelation was made. Immediately after the war began, a Saudi firm owned by Prince Al-Walid bin Talal invested $500 million in 3 Russian oil companies: Gazprom, Rosneft, and Lukoil. Tells you something about where Riyadh's loyalties lie. Then we come to Africa. The US said Africa should be free to choose while also trying to dictate its choices. The US ordered African nations, and I use that word with caution, the US ordered African nations to respect Western sanctions and not buy Russian oil. But the US gave a free pass to Europe to violate the very same rules and keep buying Russian gas. African countries are calling out this hypocrisy. This is what South Africa said last week. We will not be bullied into taking sides. The US needs to stop patronizing others. The same message came from Rwanda. It told the US to respect its sovereignty. Back in the month of June, the head of the African Union said the very same thing. He met Vladimir Putin in the city of Sochi. He praised Africa's relations with Russia and asked the US to lift sanctions. In the month of April, the United Nations General Assembly held a vote to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council. Do you know how many African countries voted for this resolution? Only 10 out of 54. 9 countries opposed the resolution and 35 others abstained or were absent. This is a serious snub to the United States, and it wasn't the first one. In the month of March this year, when the UNG held a vote calling upon Russia to withdraw troops from Ukraine, 17 African countries abstained from voting against Moscow. What explains all of this? Is it the food and fuel shortage that Western sanctions have triggered in Africa, or is it the patronizing attitude of Western countries towards Africa? The answer perhaps is a mix of both. You see, African nations are tired of being pawns in global struggles. They're tired of being told what to do and suffer the repercussions of decisions that are not theirs. The last Cold War left them frozen in time. It turned their continent into a battlefield, a staging ground for the East and the West. The 1960 Congo crisis, the 1966 Namibian War of Independence, the 1975 Angolan Civil War, the 1977 war in Ethiopia. They were all a result of the battle between the US and the Soviet Union, a battle between capitalism and communism. These wars claimed millions of African lives, cost untold amounts of money, and hindered Africa's growth. This time, African states are wary of repeating that mistake. As are several other countries. India, for instance, it has refused to toe America's line. In the last Cold War, India pursued the policy of non-alignment, non-adherence to either side. This time, India is pursuing a policy of multi-alignment, a series of parallel relationships that strengthen multilateral ties, meaning India is taking decisions based solely on its own national interest, not on how other governments are going to perceive those decisions. And just like the last time, Latin America is on board with India in making these calls. Take Mexico, for instance. A few days back, the Mexican president said that he was going to submit a proposal to the United Nations, a proposal to create a commission for world truce. And he said this commission would remain for 5 years, and it should include Prime Minister Modi of India, Pope Francis, and United Nations Secretary General. These should be the members. He said this commission is required so that governments can dedicate themselves to supporting their own people instead of fighting other people's wars. The message is loud and clear. This is not the 20th century. The times have changed. The US cannot bully others into taking sides. It cannot be oblivious to their interests and then issue lectures on morality. The US set out to isolate Russia in this war through economic sanctions and political pressure. It's not making much progress. Europe faces a tough winter ahead. The world is suffering food shortages. Russia too is suffering, but it's far from isolated, let alone defeated.